Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
You know, I was talking with Brad. Brad's our engineer this morning. And we were talking off the air about, Post-it notes. And we were talking about how Post-it notes were developed. And he said, it was an accident, right? I said, yes, it was. So the story behind the 3M Post-it notes was there's a guy that was trying to make some glue, and the formula didn't work quite right because it would adhere, but not too well. And so he tried to influence upper management that, we could do something with this. We could make a product. And they kind of laughed at him and said, nah, it's nuts. So he was kind of persistent, and he applied this glue to little pieces of paper, and he stuck them together in a small pad, and he left them on the desks of the decision makers. And they started using them and writing notes on them and sticking them on different places so that they could be kind of like reminders, the way we use Post-it notes today. So they determined how to apply these little pieces of paper in the business setting. And then they ran out of them. And they wanted more, and he said, well, we're going to have to make them. And that's how Post-it notes became a 3M product. It was an accident. And there are lots of things that have happened in the course of science and technology and business that were accidentally stumbled upon. So here's a great product that many of us use. We've all seen it, and it was truly an accident. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. We are delighted you're in class with us today. 2 hours. 2 hours, Monday through Friday. 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. is when we're live. We're rebroadcast all over the country, AM, FM, satellite. And there are archives on GCNlive.com, republicbroadcasting.org, YouTube, Ron Gibson's channel. And we're delighted to have you with us. There's a link to your instructors on the website, usaprepares.com. And today, Guineith Isaacs is live with us in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Guineith, I'll tell you what, I am doing really well. I'm delighted. I really am. I'm under the care of some of the most brilliant people on the planet. Dr. Norman Shealy, Dr. Richard Allen Miller, Miles in Europe, Dr. Bill Deagle, and it's all working, and it's working. Really, it's wonderful. So here I am, and we're going to be discussing with you today something pretty neat. We talked about ancient farming methods, and now we're going to add to that mix understanding your local climate, your local seasons, the wheel of the year, equinoxes, solstices, and moon planting. That's really interesting as well, because we have some farmer friends who absolutely positively will not plant outside of moon planting dates and so forth. And they actually believe that there is really something to it. And we're going to talk about that today as well. And where you live has an influence on how you plant and farm. So I think this is wonderful. I'm all excited.
Yep. I think it's a really, really understudied topic. Moon planting has been used since ancient times, okay? And it's kind of coincidental because I sort of didn't quite consider that we were actually coming up on Halloween here, okay? But if you look at the origins of Halloween, it's actually the Celtic New Year, okay? And the ancient Celts began their year when the harvest was in, okay? So at the beginning of winter. And the ancient Celts marked the beginning of winter from the end of October, okay? And, they considered November, December, January to be the winter months, okay? And then February, March, April, they considered to be springtime. And then May, June, July, they considered to be the summer. And then August, September, October, they considered to be the fall or the autumn, okay? And if you look at that wheel, they looked at the year as being a wheel, okay? And it would turn around, and then it would turn around again. And you had something to celebrate if you got to the end of October and all the crops were in the barn, okay? And your animals were in a reasonably sleek state from, being on good pastures all spring, summer, and autumn, or all spring, summer, and fall. If they were fat, then you were probably going to make it through the winter, and your animals were probably going to make it through the winter as well. If your crops were not in the barn by Halloween, then you were in trouble because the weather was going to start getting really bad after that, okay? And, then after Halloween, the chances of snowfall were very, very high in the Celtic world, and you would start winding your whole year down towards Christmas, okay? And they would say they had a midwinter festival around about December the 21st to the 25th, okay? And that's, some version of Yule. And that was, that was the real crisis point of their year when things were likely to be the hardest. It was likely to be the coldest, and the wind would be blowing. There might be storms, snow, no sun, or not much sunlight, and so on and so forth. So how do you respond to such circumstances if you're an ancient Celt? You have a party. You cheer yourself up, and you open up some of your stored supplies, which is likely to include things like beer and pork. Maybe you've got some poultry living with you in the barn, okay, which is also your house. And so you catch a neighbourhood goose, and you wring its neck and you cook it. And you have a party, and you cheer yourself up. And if that party lasts from December the 21st to the 25th, so be it. You've basically resupplied your winter stores of fat. You've cheered your spirits through the darkest and coldest part of the year, and so your chances of surviving the winter and into the following springtime are vastly increased. Okay? So this is what I mean by the wheel of the year. Then you go into springtime, and you get to oh gosh, the dates, March the 21st, okay, which is the spring equinox. If you've made it to the spring equinox, that's a real reason to celebrate, because around about March the 21st, your chickens start laying, and the rabbits pop their heads up out of the holes again, okay, so you can actually go and catch them. And your animals that you've mated the previous fall, they begin to drop their young, okay? Like, for instance, sheep and goats have a 5-month gestation. You mate them in the fall for them to drop their young around about end of March, beginning of April, okay? When the animals like sheep and goats and cattle drop their young, then you know you've got milk. And so that's another reason to have a party. Because you've got milk again after a whole winter with no milk. And, you know, because you dry your cattle off after Christmas because there's not much hay, and the cattle in the late stages of pregnancy, they need the nutrition that they have for the developing baby calf inside them, okay? So between Christmas and, you know, the end of March, you don't have milk. When the animal drops its young, starts making milk again, that's another reason to have a party. And so the ancient Celts would have a party, and you know what they would call it? They would call that party, in Gaelic, Antím, okay? Im means butter. So they named the whole party after the fact that now you began to have dairy products again. It was the festival of dairy product, milk, eggs, butter, cheese, and such like. And yeah, I think I can hear some music coming in the background.
Yeah, you can. We're going into a break, and I've got a comment to make about how these times of the year affect us here on the farm, right here in Missouri. And, you know, there is a time for celebration, and we feel it just as well. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. So here at the farm in Missouri, we grow grass, and then we cut it at the appropriate time. Sometimes twice a season, sometimes 3 times. And ultimately, our goal is to end up with about 350,000 pounds of hay that we will feed to the cows and calves over the winter. And we feed about 3,000 pounds of hay every day. And when it's cold, when it's cold, we will feed a little more, maybe 4,000, maybe even 4,500. When it's a little warmer, you know, during the winter, on those nice sunny days, if we can cut back a little bit, we do. And we're very careful not to allow the cows to waste the hay. Now, when we get down toward the end of that pile of hay, it's quite disconcerting, because if we don't have enough hay, what happens is the cows look around and they go, you know what? On the other side of that fence, I think there's some grass we can find. I think. And they'll just break through the fence.
That's a very big creature. So basically, it's their goodwill that they're in your paddock.
Yes, and you know, I thank them every day that I see them. I'll talk to them, I'll go out there, and I'll say, I just want to thank you all, really, for adopting us as your family and staying with us. I really appreciate it. And I really do. I tell the dogs and the cats the same thing. And the chickens, because literally, they don't have to stay here. They can all walk off. Now, I know what it's like when a herd of cows walks off. I know what that's like. And that's no fun. I mean, it's, you know, if they think it's better where they are, they'll stay there. But if they think it's better someplace else, they just might leave. And then once they leave and they think it's better where they've just gone, it's really hard to get them back to where they didn't think it was so good. So it's something that, oh, geez, that's something you don't want to wish on anybody.
Very big creature.
Yeah. So what I'm getting to is around, you were talking about March 21st, a time for celebration. Well, we're looking at our hay very carefully throughout the winter, and as we get toward the end of March, we're like really, really concerned. And then when we get into April, and the grass just starts to grow a little bit, and we get a sigh of relief. We can have that sigh of relief that we've survived. We have survived the winter. So that celebration that you're talking about, we don't quite go to that extreme, but yes, we do experience, those feelings that, we made it through the winter, because the winter brings, lots of challenges to us. One of the things that we're going to talk about, farming without a tractor, those kinds of things. But I got to tell you, when I'm on that tractor, and it's an open cab tractor, meaning I get to experience all the elements, and the sleet and the freezing rain and the hail and the snow, and I'm there and I'm getting pelted on my face. I'm wrapped up pretty well. I've got goggles on, but still parts of my face are exposed. And the thing I always think about, always comes back to this. I am frozen, driving several miles on this tractor, and let's say it's way, way, way below freezing. The cows are freezing, I'm freezing, and the dirt road is a sheet of ice, and it's just terrible conditions. And I always think about the same thing. I think about how much those politicians, how hard they have to work driving in their remote start vehicles. They hit the button. They wait till their vehicle warms up. They've got to trek from the front door, all the way maybe 20 feet to their vehicle. They drive to work. They park in these, garages that have, and they're fighting for us. Well, thank goodness that they're fighting for us, because what would we do without them? And that's what I think about, how hard they work.
I think we'd probably survive. You and I would probably survive, and most of the class would probably survive.
Yeah. But that, it always comes back. It always comes back to this. I'm really freezing, shivering. I'm dressed with layers and layers and layers, and I look like I'm, really ready for the Arctic. And I'm seriously, that's how I dress, and I'm still freezing.
Get the hay out of the barn themselves, are they?
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't do it as they wouldn't do it.
If you didn't have your tractor, you'd have your bullock dray.
Yeah.
You'd have your pet cows, pet steers near the house.
Yep.
And you'd have to hook them up to the bullock dray.
Yep.
And you still have to do the hay thing.
Yep. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, I want to share this with you. So on last Friday, I was talking with our engineer, Patrick, and I am really fortunate to have extraordinary engineers here at USA Prepares, at Genesis Communications Network, and I'm not embellishing. I really am fortunate. And so I was talking with Patrick, and we have a couple minutes sometimes between the segments, during the commercial announcements and news, top of the hour, bottom of the hour, and I get a chance to chat with the engineers for just a couple minutes, and I like to do that. It's a lot of fun for me, and so I was talking with Patrick, and I said, so I'll bet the break room at GCN is a blast. Where you guys all get together and you kind of talk about the things that you're talking about on the broadcast that you're engineering, and you get a chance to, compare hosts, and you think your guy's something. No, my guy's worse. That kind of thing. Now I'm paraphrasing. It didn't go exactly these words, but I'm paraphrasing. And, you can talk about the idiosyncrasies and the quirks of the hosts, and that must be a blast. And he said, yeah, it is. And I said, so do you find yourself agreeing or disagreeing with the host? And he said, no, sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. And then he said, I don't agree with you all the time. and I'm thinking, What? Really? You don't agree with me all the time? Are you serious? And, he said, yeah. I said, well, we should talk about this. And I'm thinking, so we should go on the air, and we're going to do it on Friday. So Patrick and I are going to talk. And I asked him, so what do you disagree with? And he said, well, you talk about the millennials. And I do. And I talk about how I don't think they know too much. And he said, no, they're really, really bright, and they do all these really cool things. And so he's going to come on, and he said he's a millennial. That's great. So he's going to come on with me on Friday, hour number 2. So I've invited our class. If you want to join in and you want to pile on Vinny and let me know how wrong I am, I'd love to be educated, with constructive criticism, the errors that I have in my ways. Okay, so that's Friday, and so I'm really, really looking forward to that. But before this broadcast started, just a couple minutes before, I was talking with Brad, our engineer, today, and I said, did you talk to Patrick? And he said, yeah, he's going to be on with you on Friday. I said, yeah. And so I'm going to give him, one last chance at redemption. And, I think Patrick was in the background. I think Patrick thought I was serious. And, of course I'm not, but I'm really looking forward to this kind of thing. And I've never done it before. I have never been involved in debate on the air, with someone on the other side of the argument. So I'm really, really excited about that. So class, if you have an opinion, either way, if you are, if you think that millennials really, that maybe I haven't been as kind as I should have been with millennials, feel free to call in. I'm going to give you that number right now. So on Friday, hour number 2, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Now, if you think I'm right with some of the things I'm saying, feel free to call in as well. And I know that Kyle in Montana is, saying, I already got the number. I'll call in, Vinny. I know that's what he's thinking. Kyle's one of our instructors, and I know George in New Hampshire is thinking something similar, and other instructors are thinking similar things. Probably John Reagan as well. So just a thought, if you'd like to join in now. We're not going to bash anybody. It's going to be fact-based, things that we've seen. And we can have opinions, but we're not going to bash anybody. We're going to be ladies and gentlemen about this. So I just wanted to share with you that this is something new. I have never done it. And one of the things that I avoided like 3 things in school. One was computers. I just didn't like computers at all. That's when I was studying formal education. And one of the very first things I did was become a computer systems analyst. Another thing I didn't like was public speaking, and I avoided that at all costs. And, and I literally avoided all public speaking classes. Every one I could avoid, I did. And so here I am on the air. And the other thing was I avoided debate. So time for debate. And that's Friday. So I just want to share that with you. One other thing, I got a call yesterday. The answering machine took the call. Dr. Bill Deagle, who was a broadcaster on this network, invited me to be on the air with him again. I was on with him last week, and he invited me to be on his show this week on Thursday. So I agreed to do that. I'm delighted to be doing that, and I think we're going to be talking about preparedness. And now, Dr. Bill Deagle runs really fast. I mean, he idles at at least 120, as many of our instructors do. And I got to tell you, it's really something else to be on the air with him, because you never know where it's going to go. And in the same sentence, he can change directions 3 different times.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's going to be fun as well. So I wanted to share that with you. That's Thursday. I'll be on the air with him. And we're talking about, planting and being successful. And, there's one of our instructors, has made the comment that if you, Marjorie Wildcraft is her name, and she made the comment that if you, something like this, I'm not even paraphrasing because I don't remember the quote exactly, but if you try to grow a garden and you don't have a complete failure, when you try to grow your first garden, that's pretty successful, something like that. And
I would say that's probably true. My very first garden on my actually it was when I first met my husband, I decided that I was going to plant some vegetables out the back, and he says, "Oh well, good luck with that, but I don't give you much hope." He said, "My guess is the children will pull up all the plants." He had 5 children, and they were a pretty feral bunch of children. They're all adults now, and they've actually mostly made good for themselves. They're actually out there in the universe, and they are, doing good things in this world. But as children, they were wild. They were really wild. And, probably having that wildish nature in adulthood has served them well because they're a little bit less inclined to obey government instructions.
Yeah, right.
And considering that most of the instructions that the government gives you, from what I've seen, are deliberately designed to hurt you.
Yes.
I think that a bit of an inclination to not obey the dictates of the government is probably a good thing.
Yeah. I think you're right. What I would say, though, is that the government is inclined to show you how you can hurt yourself. That's what I would say. So, they have programs that they can sign you up for, and if you agree to them, you'll probably end up hurting yourself under the belief that you're going to make things better for yourself. But over time, in the long run, you're hurting yourself. Yeah. I
would agree. Yeah, everything that they do is harmful, from what I can see. Just about everything they do is harmful. Mm-hmm. But anyway, after my husband Archie died, I bought a farm in Geraldton of about 10 acres, and I planted a garden, and it was a failure. It was a total flop. And this area had been known for its amazing qualities as a market gardening area. And yet I could not grow garlic in this area. That was the crop that I attempted first of all. Mm-hmm. And do you know something? I would absolutely agree with Marjorie Wildcraft. If you have not had a failure as a gardener, you're not really a gardener.
Yes.
That's extraordinary. Either that or you are absolutely exceptional. Now you look at my garden and it's a jungle. It really is. And every year it's becoming more so. Mm-hmm. And it's probably going to get to the point this year where I'll have to put a little table out the front with an honesty box to sell later on in the year, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And, especially considering that we live in a semi-arid area, and we can go for weeks at a time with temperatures in excess of 40 degrees centigrade. Okay? That's like weeks at a time of between 110 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, every single day. And yet I'm anticipating, if the Lord God wills, that I will have enough produce this summer to maybe be able to start selling some.
That would be wonderful.
At the gate. That would be great. And, for example, I've got around about 70 zucchini seedlings, courgette seedlings, that is. and, probably around about 30 or 40 pumpkin seedlings. And that's what I mean. When you've got 30 or 40 pumpkin seedlings and you're thinking, gosh, where am I going to put all these guys?
Yeah.
That's, in a way, that's a good problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the thing is, this is with us heading into the summer. Okay, in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah. Hold that thought. Sometimes my ADHD kicks in. And so during the break, I typed in the word on a search engine. I typed in the word politician. I wanted to see what the definition was. And it says here on the internet, a politician, a person who is professionally involved in politics, especially as a holder of or a candidate for an elected office. And then it has synonyms: legislator, elected official, statesman. Now that's a stretch. Statesman? Yeah, right. Barney Frank is a statesman? Really? Stateswoman, public servant? Really? That's what they think they are? And then it gets to the real definition. The real definition of a politician is just below what I just read on the same page. And it says, a person who acts in a manipulative and devious way, typically to gain advancement within an organization. Now that sounds like the definition of a politician to me. What do you think?
Yep, I would tend to agree. And
wow.
You know something? I was just considering before when you were talking, going back to how people used to do things in the ancient world. Okay, before motor vehicles were invented, and before even steam power was invented. I'll tell you how it worked. And this is my prediction, not a psychic prediction, just a common sense prediction of how things are going to pan out when, when the Corolla starts to hit the propeller. And when, the modern world starts to go away, as it surely must. Because, it's just totally, it's ridiculous, that people can be paid six-figure sums to warm seats in offices totally disconnected from the natural world and then have the presumption to tell us how to live our lives. That can't continue. In the ancient world, politicians were farmers, okay? They were farmers on a grand scale. They would have estates of maybe 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 acres. And they would have whole villages and whole towns located within their estate, and they would own all the houses and all the, retail buildings within the village, okay? That's why he was called a lord or a landlord. And all the people who were there by the good grace of the local lord. And do you know why? Communism's got it all wrong. They say that, he oppressed all those people, yada, yada, yada. That's actually not how it was. It was that his family, they had a business, and their business was running things for the best benefit of everybody, okay? Somebody had to plan things. Somebody had to organize things. And the things that they would organize are, where are we going to plant the wheat crop this year? What field are we going to sow in pasture hay? Who's the best bullock trainer? Who's the best horse breaker? We're going to, he would know that he maybe had, 15 or 20 pregnant mares that means that he knows that in 2, 3, 4 years' time, he's going to have 15 or 20 young horses that need to be broken in. And so he would know everybody in the district, and he would know who the best horse breaker was. And it would be his job to go out and organise the horse breakers to come in and break those 15 or 20 horses. Yep.
You know what you're talking about?
That was the Lord's
You're talking
job.
about breakfast. You're talking about breakfast, lunch, and dinner here at the farmhouse. That's what we do every day.
That's
every
right.
day. Those planning meetings. Yeah, for certain. Yeah, we'll be right back right after top of the hour. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, I want to tell you, you know, when you call the farmhouse here, and sometimes Mrs. Finelli picks up the phone and chats with you for a minute or so. Well, she has picked up one of your expressions. Yep, she has. Never used it before. And that expression is, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Now, do you know you say that? Do you know that you say that?
I say that.
Yeah, you do. You do. And so yesterday, I heard Mrs. Finelli use that for the first time. Now, she has no idea that she said it, okay? And I don't think she has any idea where it came from. It's just that she picked that up. And I think it's out of fondness. I think it's out of the fact that she likes you and she enjoys chatting with you that she picked that up. Now, if she didn't like you, and she heard you say things, she certainly would not pick those expressions up. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you that she said that's all right.
Yeah.
So we've been.
You know what happens in life. You can have good things happen in your life. We can have bad things happen in your life. I've had a horrible life in a lot of ways, but I haven't let it destroy me. Okay. And for everybody out there in the class, you might be tempted. You might have, you know, so-called government officials giving you a bad time, trying to destroy your family, trying to take your land off of you, you know, hassling you, doing this, doing that. I've been there. I've come through it the other side. They haven't destroyed me. I'm still alive. I'm still on my land. I've still got my children with me. And I could not have done it without God. But one key instrument that God uses is, you know, yes, go and have a cry by all means. But when you're finished having your cry, I learnt this one from Frank Sinatra. You have to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and start all over again. You know that,
and it's hard to.
Frank Sinatra song.
Yeah,
Work like a soul inspired till the battle of the day is won. You may be sick and tired, but you'll be a man, my son. You know that song? I won't sing it. I won't, you know, although apparently I have got rather a good voice. But it's true. You've got to realize that and here's another version of the same thing that my dad used to say. He used to say, you know, that sometimes he would get to thinking about where the buck stopped. That's an old saying. I don't think I've heard many people say it lately. That there used to be a saying, the buck stops here. Okay?
Yeah, Harry Truman.
That means
Harry Truman.
the chain, I didn't know that Harry Truman said it.
Yeah,
but it's
it was on his desk.
The responsibility has to stop somewhere. That's what the saying means. And he said it was a very uncomfortable feeling when he realized that the buck stopped with him. But it also imparted to him a great sense of responsibility, that he was in charge of his family, okay? And if anything went wrong in the family, ultimately he felt that it was his fault, okay? Whether it actually was or not. But often, you know, there was some mistake that he'd made in planning, maybe not intentionally, but he would have to go and correct it. Okay? Now, that is what is missing with the millennial generation. They don't want to take responsibility, and that's a big mistake. Okay? They don't want to recognize when they've done something wrong. They want to think, oh, but it was ultimately somebody else's fault. No, 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 no. If it was your life and something's gone wrong, then you ultimately could have done something better sometime in the past that could have prevented what is happening now. Usually, if you look back and if you take a moment to sit down and think, how did that happen? That's another thing I haven't heard people say as a response to bad things happening lately. People used to always say, well, how did that happen? You know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard people say that in response to bad news for quite a while. But that's what everybody used to say. How did that happen? You know?
Because it was so unusual.
Yeah.
It was so unusual. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so unusual for people to have negative impact. But the thing is, when you are the lord or the lady of your estate, whether that estate is a 500 square metre suburban block or whether that estate is 50,000 acres, if your name's on that title deed, you're the lord of that estate, and it's your responsibility to look after it. Okay, it's your responsibility to look after the people, the animals, the plants, and the ecology on that estate. Okay? That means water, air quality, electricity, energy, you name it, gardens, whatever. People have lost that, and you see it in the modern world. Okay? People, they don't want to take responsibility for their life. They don't want to look after their house. And when it all falls apart, it's all somebody else's fault. They don't realize the buck stops with them. If it's their name on the title deed, it's their fault that things went wrong. Okay?
Yeah.
And,
there used to,
yeah.
there used to be something called a buck slip, B-U-C-K. And what that would be is in the corporate world, I'm talking like in the 40s, maybe even in the 30s and the 20s, you would send it up higher for, an approval. It's like, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I don't have the authority, so let's send that up to the boss. And that boss would say, well, I don't have the authority. And it would, the buck would get passed. That buck slip.
That's where that saying came from.
Okay, so it was it was like a piece of paper. Yeah, like a piece of paper, and somebody had to sign off. And this is how I remember it. And so President Truman, he probably didn't originate the phrase "the buck stops here," but he made it more famous by putting that sign on his desk, like there's nobody above me, to approve this, so it stops right here. And he had to do something with it. So it's not like he could pass it on. He had to make the decision. And that's what he meant by the buck, as in the buck slip stops here. Yeah. Because he couldn't pass it on.
If you look at most of the early presidents of the United States, I think most of them were actually farmers. Mm-hmm. I know that George Washington certainly was a farmer.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson. Madison.
Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, from memory. Yep. He was an industrialist, but he was also a farmer.
Yeah.
And and this is the crazy, ironic thing. Wasn't he also a slave owner?
Well, George Washington was, and Thomas Jefferson was, and the problem. As a matter of fact,
I think if you looked into it, you would find that Abraham Lincoln was actually a slave owner, but that he released his slaves from bondage at some point. But do you know something? So did General Lee.
Mm-hmm. And by the way,
General Lee
Arlington
was
National...
also a farmer, and he also released his slaves from bondage prior to it becoming an issue in the Civil War.
And as I remember it...
Yep.
As I remember it, Arlington National Cemetery was Lee's farm. And,
was it?
Yeah. And the North decided that what they were going to do is, well, they needed a place to bury their dead. So they would start like at the front porch of Lee's farmhouse and work away from the farmhouse. Yep. And that was, and then at the end of the war, Lee just said, it's all yours. You got the farm. Yeah. Which was, a cemetery.
Wow.
So, I mean, I'll tell you what, the North was pretty rough on the South. I lived in a little hamlet, and the next hamlet down the road, about 8 miles down the road, there was a railroad track. And it was used during the War of Northern Aggression, which is what they call the Civil War.
In the South.
The War of Northern Aggression. And to this day, there's a plaque there, and it said, something like, and I'm paraphrasing, the North did this. The North came down and set fire to the rails, built a big fire on the rails to get the rails to become red hot. And then they could bend them. Yeah. They could bend the rail so that it was absolutely not useful anymore. And that would stop the trains and the train cars from using that track and resupplying the South. So, I mean, the farms were burned up. I'll tell you what, North was really, really rough on the South. Yeah. And the natives of the South, the guys who have stolen the land from the American Indians, those people have not forgotten what the North did. And they are still fighting the War of Northern Aggression. And so they have a saying in the South, at least they did 30 years ago, and that saying is, if you're from the North and you're visiting the South, the expression goes, "Welcome to the South. We'll be glad to take your money."
And go home.
And they're not kidding. Yeah, and go home. Yes, and they have another expression called Yankees and damn Yankees. And a Yankee is a guy who comes and visits and spends a couple weeks and goes home. A damn Yankee is a guy who does the same thing and stays. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and she's in Australia. And if you'd like to get more information about how to contact her, just go to usaprepares.com. Click on the Instructors tab. You'll find her right there. And there's a link to her Facebook page. Take you right to it. And you can learn more about Guineith Isaacs. Guineith has a wealth of information. She knows a lot about a lot. And it's a real blast broadcasting with Guineith Isaacs. So let me just take a minute and tell you how this all happened. So Guineith called the farmhouse a number of times after the broadcast, and we would chat. And I said, would you like to come on the air with me? And she said yes, she would. And so we did a broadcast, and I liked it. And we talk off the air again, and I said, would you like to come on? And yep, and again and again and again. And finally, I said, how about Tuesday? We've got a slot on Tuesday. And she told me that she would, love to have her own radio show. And I said, well, I can't make that happen, but I can certainly make 2 hours a week happen. So if you'd like 2 hours a week with me, we can do that. And so that's how it happened. And that's, and I just love, is that right, Guineith?
That's right. Yep, that's more or less how it happened. I'll tell you what, I've just made in this last week a big step forward. I still have that dream and that goal of having my own radio show, not just however it happens. But, if you don't begin to plan for something, it's never going to happen. And I had a big step forward on that path, okay? And that is a couple of months ago, I think I told you about this at the time. I saw that there was a mixing desk on sale
Yes, you did.
at my local pawnbrokers, and a recording quality mic, a broadcast quality mic, for sale at the local pawnbrokers. So I went down and put a lay-by on it, and it was a very, very high quality mixing desk, Behringer. They make some of the best mixing desks in the world, in my humble opinion. It's a bit like types of fencing wire. You can have endless arguments about this. And everybody seems to have their favourite brand. But Behringer mixing desks have always been a favourite brand of mine. And my husband, he was a professional musician, and from time to time he had to do with recording and, television work and such like. And he learnt about the various types of recording equipment, and he was the one who put me onto Behringer as a brand. And funnily enough, they're made in Germany. Yes. And do you know what my dad always used to say? He said the Germans are very, very good at everything that they do to do with engineering, including killing people.
Yeah. Well, that's true. They were during World War II.
That is actually true. Okay. So speaking of firearms, I think that the two top nations on the face of the earth for firearms manufacture are probably the United States and Germany. I would say that if a firearm is manufactured in one of those two countries, there's probably very little to complain about. Anywhere else in the world, but especially the United States. Yeah.
I have a K98K rifle, and it's German, and it was used by the German Army during World War II. And I actually have a couple of them. And one of them, I bought them at a gun show many, many years ago, and they were dusty. Right? They weren't all shined up. And one of them happens to have a single SS rune on it. And we traced it back. Well, here's what it means. It means it was made in a concentration camp. This is one of the few rifles. Yes. Pretty rare. But
that's amazing.
Yep. So very high quality. Very high quality. Yep. And you're right. You're right. I believe that some of the finest firearms come from Germany and the United States. Yeah, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. George in New Hampshire is joining us. Welcome, George.
Hi, Vincent. Hello, Guineith.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. I just wanted to say that, like you, I like the Mauser K98s, and I have several. But the thing of it is that you realize that our government, before World War I, around 1903, negotiated with Mauser to make basically a licensed copy called the 1903 Springfield, because during the Spanish-American War, they had encountered a nasty surprise with the Spanish Army when they were charging up San Juan Hill, for example. He says the Spaniard soldiers were armed with Mauser rifles, and their rate of fire was much superior to, I think many of our men still had those single-shot 45-70 rifles. And a lot of casualties were inflicted by numerically inferior side of the Spaniards. But the Springfield, they had to pay a royalty for a number of years up until before World War I, just to be able to make almost an exact copy of the Mauser 98.
Yes. I was walking, we'll talk about the gun show loophole as politicians refer to it. And I don't think it's a loophole. I think it's just our right to do this. Now, that's what I'm talking about is
right.
Yes, and here's what they call a gun show loophole. So if a person is at a gun show, let's say an attendee at a gun show, and he has a K98K Mauser rifle, in his hand, or he's using the strap and he's got it over his shoulder, and he's got a sign on it that says "for sale," and he's walking around inside the gun show, but he's not a licensed dealer. He is just some guy who has a K98K for sale, and he's looking for a buyer. They would call that the gun show loophole, because any of us who live in that particular state can go up to him and say, "Oh, wow, that's really neat. May I look at it?" And the guy would probably say, "Sure." Hand it to you. You'd make sure that it was there was no cartridge chambered in it, and you might look at it carefully and say, "Well, so how much would you like for this?" And then there's a price that is asked, and then maybe that price is countered, and an agreement may be reached, and then some cash will exchange hands, the rifle will exchange hands, and the deal is done. And that would be called a gun show loophole by politicians. Now, that's because it happens at a gun show with some guy walking around who is not a licensed dealer. Now, let's just extend that for a little bit. Let's say a guy is walking around with a notebook computer, and he's got a little sign on it, and he's at the same gun show, and it says, "for sale." Now, it'd be a little unusual that someone would try to sell a notebook computer, but it's entirely possible. And someone could go through the same buy-sell discussion with them and say, "I'll tell you what, that's worth $150 to me. Here, I'll give you that." And then they exchange cash, and the computer exchanges hands, and that's done. So the difference is, one, it's a firearm, and it's frowned upon. However, in terms of commerce, there's no difference. In terms of rights, there's no difference. It could be a refrigerator or any other personal property item. Now let's take it to what happened with me, with the K9. I'm sorry, with the 1903 Springfield. 1903 A3, I believe, is what I have. And I was walking out of the parking lot from the gun show in the afternoon, and a guy was walking in, and he had this Springfield 1903 in his hand, and he was going into the gun show with it. Now, why would he be doing that? Well, there's a really high likelihood that he wanted to sell it. So I asked him in the parking lot if he was going to sell it. And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how much would you like for it?" He gave me a number. And I said, "May I see it?" And he said, "Sure." So I looked at it in the parking lot. I said, "I'll tell you what, I'd like to buy it if that's okay with you." And I bought it right then and there. This was maybe 20 years ago. So I bought, and it wasn't all that desirable back then. Now I'll bet you a 1903 Springfield, that variant is probably darn close to $800, $900. George, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'll say that Guineith, your father was right when he said that the Germans were, they were about as fiendish as any other people that are given in the human race. And, but they had technology, and I had a friend of mine tell me, he said, the Irish and the Germans get along very well. He says the Irish like to drink and make plans. He goes, and the Germans like to drink and make plans. The only problem is the Irish drink, and their plans usually don't come to very much, whereas with the Germans, plans do. I couldn't resist that one. I'm sorry.
You know something? You're absolutely right. My final thesis, when I was studying at the University of Melbourne, the very last thesis that I wrote was on, Irish and Scottish politics and history, probably from the days of Bonnie Prince Charlie to the present. And, I came across this little gem of information, and the Irish people are the only nation on earth who planned a national revolution to throw off the oppression of the British. And then 48 hours before this plan was due to be implemented to get rid of the British, to have a revolution and get rid of the British and institute their own government, they decided that they would have it the day before. They were going to have the revolution on Easter Monday, but on Good Friday they decided that they were going to have the revolution on Easter Sunday instead of Easter Monday. The leadership decided that, and there's just one little problem. They forgot to notify their whole army that the revolution was now going to happen on Sunday instead of Monday. That's a historical fact. It's jaw-dropping, isn't it? But it's absolutely for the Irish.
The devil is in the details, I'll tell you. And I know there were very suppressed, but the Scottish were too. When I have both sides of my family, both sides. Both sides of my father's side of the family were Irish and Scottish and some English. But the thing is that I'll tell you, that my father also used to say the Irish do not stick together, and I think it's with the clans a lot of times, maybe more so in Scotland, but in Ireland, they tend to argue amongst themselves quite a lot to the point where they're able to be exploited to a large degree.
It's like this. It's in Scotland and Ireland. The difference with Scotland, they are the same people, they speak the same language, okay, and they have the same mythology and the same culture in Scotland and Ireland, and actually the same clans even, the same clan names. The Scottish clans all came from Ireland originally, and mostly from Donegal and Ulster, okay. Now, the difference is this. Going back to ancient farming methods and planning. If you don't plan your life well in Scotland, in the Scottish Highlands, you're going to die. You can live in Ireland through most parts of Ireland, okay, especially in the south, and you can behave in the most stupid, atrocious manner imaginable, and you're not going to die because it never gets really, really hot, and it never gets really, really cold. You put a potato in the ground, you come back 6 months later, and you've got between 3 and 5 or maybe even 10 kilograms of food from one potato. Okay? For most of Irish history, that's how it's been. The grass always grows. It doesn't matter where you put your horse. The horse and the cow is going to eat. It's going to get enough food because it rains several times a week all year round. You don't have to plan for your pasture. You don't have to put in a hay crop, okay, because the grass grows all year round. Through most of Ireland, there's no snow. But in Ulster and in Donegal, it's not like that. Donegal, parts of Donegal look like the face of the moon, okay, and they actually make the Scottish Highlands look very, very attractive, especially up near Connemara, which is right up to the northwest of Ireland, the northwestern corner. There's a part called Connemara, okay? And all through that area, those are the most warlike tribes in Ireland, are the ones found in Ulster and in Donegal. And it's always been that way. You can go back in Irish mythology, 3,000 and 4,000 years. They have got myths. There's one famous one in particular, Tyne Bó Cúailnge, is in Gaelic, which is the cattle raid of Cooley. And the Gaelic people, both the Scottish and the Irish, had a game that they would play, and that would be cattle raiding. And it was a game. And so it worked like this. You would have a mob of cattle in your valley, okay, and the clan next door would have a mob of cattle in their valley. And you would do your best to make that mob of cattle that was at your neighbour's valley to to be the mob of cattle that was in your valley. And they would do the same thing. And it was a game, and the one who was best at the game got the most cattle. And nobody was supposed to die, but it was very serious. And what it did was it kept the military skills up to it. Now, the original cattle raid, okay, was between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, and it involved the Queen of Ulster.
Hold that thought. It's a quick news item that is absolutely shocking to me. Census Bureau data just released. 44.6% of families in California don't speak English at home.
Oh,
44.6.
Wow.
Okay, all right. Let's go on to Texas. 35.6% in Texas. New Mexico, 34.5%. In New Jersey, this is an absolute shocker to me. New Jersey, 31.7%. In New York, yes, 31% in New York. Let me just repeat these, and then we'll continue on with our discussion about cattle raiding. So, 44.6% of homes in California don't speak English. 35.6% in Texas. 34.5% in New Mexico. 31.7% in New Jersey. And 31% in New York. Absolutely shocking statistics by the Census Bureau. They are shocking to me. Yeah.
I hate to say it, but why am I not that surprised?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking for... here at Missouri, we're not at the bottom, but we're number 43. And only 6.3% of us don't speak English in our homes in Missouri. West Virginia's number, is the lowest at 2.5%. But the top states are California, Texas, New Mexico, New Jersey, New York, then Nevada, Florida, Arizona, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Illinois, Rhode Island at 22.8%, Maryland, 18.9%. Let's see, in your neck of the woods, New Hampshire, only 7.7% don't speak English in New Hampshire, Georgia.
The reason being, too, is because welfare benefits were much more desirable in places like Massachusetts, which is next door, and where I was originally from. And it was important. I honestly believe that certain political individuals wanted to import a voting class that would keep them perpetually in, and they basically would keep them perpetually with bread and circus.
Yep, I would tend to agree.
Yeah, and Washington, D.C. is 17.1%.
Oh, dear.
Okay, we were talking about cattle raids.
That's right. Anyway, this was how the ancient Gaelic people kept their battle skills honed in between, episodes of war. And it also meant that the cowherds kept on having their genetics mixed up, which, as you know, as a cattle farmer, is really, really important. But they basically had this massive dispute that ended up in an all-out war over the Queen of Ulster's bull. That's what it was about. And, that there was a neighbouring king who thought he had a better bull than the Queen of Ulster. And the Queen of Ulster's bull was... They had a competition, and the Queen of Ulster's bull was judged to be the better bull. And the other king responded by basically getting his men together one day and stealing the Queen of Ulster's bull. And that resulted in a war. And they had a whole war over a bull. And that is absolutely typical for the men of Ulster. That particular story is probably at least 3,000 or 4,000 years old. That they were having, You know, especially the Northern Irish were having wars over stupid little things 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. But ultimately, they were the ones who were responsible for, those and the men of Cork were the ones who were responsible for the Irish gaining their independence. So
and how important is a bull?
People were from Cork.
And it all came from a bull.
Yeah. And how important is a bull? Half, really.
Yep.
George, thanks so much. Guineith, thank you so much.